Well, welcome to another edition of the Debt Matters podcast, where we do help Canadians find solutions to their debt with licensed insolvency trustees from across Canada. I'm Wayne Kay, and in today's show, we're going to be talking about mental health and finances. My guest today, Leigh Taylor from LCTaylor and Associates in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Leigh, thank you very much for being here today.
My pleasure, Wayne.
Boy, this is a big topic, this one, because it's going to affect a lot of people. And I was actually talking with a psychologist who said mental health is going to be our next pandemic.
Well, we may already be there.
Yep.
I mean, you look at the amount of stress that the COVID-19 pandemic has caused, and we're, got a good start.
Isn't that something? Like, just to think about that, because, you're right. Stress, anxieties, fears, and now all of a sudden you add in money on top of that, and that's never a good combination.
That's true. No good can come from that. But the problem is, is it money that causes the financial health problems or the mental health problems, or vice versa, or whatever? And it's sort of like what came first, the chicken or the egg? Was it mental health problems that caused the financial troubles, or vice versa?
Is that something that you do see once in a while in your office?
Well, I think it's fair to say that depending upon how broadly you define mental health, it's pretty hard to say that you're not suffering a lot of stress problems when you find out that you owe Revenue Canada a substantial amount of money. How do you avoid stress in that kind of a situation? And that's true, and a growing problem for Canadians, because as they start to come through the pandemic and the aftermath of the pandemic, they're finding out that a lot of the CERB money that they got, that they thought was a gift from the government, is all taxable. And now they're faced with the stress of how do you pay the tax on it, particularly considering that you're off work for a substantial period of time and you don't have the same income. And now you're trying to get back to work, and where does it end? And that's a real tough situation for millions of Canadians.
Yes. And you're so right when you talk about, when you have that kind of stress on you, there's a lot that does clinically, anxiety, depression will set in. You're going to see anger. There's quite a few different feelings that are going to happen to people. And if you're going through those, we do want to say there's lots of great resources out there, but you always reach out to your doctor as well. If you're going through something that's fairly significant, reach out to your doctor. They can give you some help. Maybe in a pill, maybe just to have a conversation makes all the difference. And I just want to make sure that people always know there's places to turn. And Bell Media actually does a really good thing with Bell Let's Talk Day, and they talk a lot about that. Just reach out and get some help and talk to your friends about it. But let's talk about finances. Do you find a lot of people keep that secret if they're in financial trouble?
Well, nobody likes to sort of admit that they're in financial trouble. They see it as, some sort of failure on their part. And, in part it usually is. So it's not hard to see. So they avoid it. They avoid dealing with it. They don't have the knowledge of what to do or how to do it. So they tend up avoiding it or doing nothing, and that just simply makes the problem a whole lot worse. It's prevalent, and it's prevalent in a lot of people that we see. Now, people handle stress differently. Some people thrive on stress, thrive on it until it kills them. Other people just bury themselves to avoid the stress, and seldom does that work. It just, creditors get frustrated, interest rates keep rising, they don't do anything to alleviate the problem or some of the problems that cause the financial difficulty, and it just is a downward spiral. So it's unfortunate, but it happens to varying degrees, but it's very prevalent.
So last time you were on the show, our big topic was budgeting for irregular incomes. And we did a lot of discussion regarding that. And if anybody wants to go back and take a listen to it, it is on our site, debtmatters.ca. But I think when we talk about budgeting, stress, mental health, those kind of all fit together as well, don't they?
Well, they certainly do. They certainly do. When you think that stress is caused by uncertainty, when you don't know what's going to be happening. You have a lot of questions about what to do, but you don't know what the answers are. We have disruptive situations in our lives. You have financial problems, it causes marital problems, it causes discord in your relationships. You end up with things like lightly veiled threats from collectors. Well, I'm going to take you to court if you don't pay it, and you don't have the money, so what do? All of this causes stress in people. Mm-hmm. One of the best ways to alleviate the stress, other than going to see your doctor and taking a pill, might simply be to deal with the causes of the stress. If you don't know what the answers are, let's go out and find out what the answers are. If you're going to be fighting with your wife over finances, let's find out what are some of the things that you can do to relieve the causes of that anxiety, the causes of the financial difficulty. If you're getting calls from collection agents, well, let's find out what the answers are. What can the collection agent do? How do you protect yourself? All those sorts of things are under the broad heading, getting the answers and relieving the stress. And to a large degree, that's what we do a lot of.
Mm-hmm. So somebody walks in with those problems. What's step number one? How do you even start with these problems?
Well, invariably we sit down and talk to people about them. What is their overall situation? What is causing the financial problems? Whether it's marital or personal situations or health or mental health. There's a lot of things that can be the root problems of financial difficulty. And those are the ones that you have to address, whatever those causes may be. Because if you don't find out what caused it, then solving the immediate financial difficulty only will result in the financial difficulties resurfacing when the problems that are unsolved resurface. So you get a good idea of what the problem is. Everybody's a little unique.
Right.
In regard to their situation. A lot of similar things in people's lives, but a lot of them are a different combination of different things. You have to find out what the problem is, and then you come up with the various solutions. Not all the solutions are perfect for everybody. Sometimes it's a combination of things that they have to do. But if you can come up with the answers to the problems, after you find out exactly what the problems are, then you've got a long ways to solving the financial problems and solving some of the stress in people's lives so they can get back to normal.
Mm-hmm. Pen and paper, sitting down around the table, is this a start as well for somebody who maybe before they get to see you?
Well, it's always a good idea. A lot of people don't know how to go about it. And it seems obvious when you're talking about it objectively that, well, just write down this, that, and the other thing. But people have to be able to recognize the problem. It's as simple as there's an old adage that if you earn so much money and you spend $1 more, you're in trouble. If you earn so much money and spend $1 less, you're happy.
Right.
And that's overly simplistic, obviously, but it makes a point. And the point is that not everybody sort of recognizes that or understands that. So if you get down to the basics, and if you're capable of doing this, sit down with your spouse. If your adult kids are being supported by you, sit down with them and start talking about the things that are important. And money may not be the most important thing in your life. And if you're smart, it probably isn't. But it sure helps to get that part of it right in order to achieve some of the things that are truly going to make you happy.
What have you seen regarding people's mental health after they do some meetings and you come up with a plan, whether it might be a consumer proposal, maybe it's a bankruptcy, but finally there's a solution for them to get out of the situation that they're in? What have you seen from those people?
A lot of times people will come into our office really full of stress. We'll sit down with them, we'll go through it, we'll give them hope. We'll give them a light at the end of the tunnel. So here's a path. Here's plan A. Plan A is you're going to go through this, that, and the other. You're going to solve this problem. It'll result in less stress, and you'll get back on your feet. Sometimes plan A is bankruptcy. Sometimes it's just careful budgeting. Sometimes it's going home and figuring out what you want. What are your priorities? Let's get started with a budget. Let's go through the basics, and then come back and talk to us, and we'll see. Once you figure out what your priorities are, then we can figure out a road to get there. So it really is a process that we go through. A lot of times it's fairly simple. People will have a pretty good idea what caused the problem. I mean, if you've just gone through a marriage breakup and you know what the problem is, you just don't know how to get past it. Some of those are simpler to deal with than you might imagine. Some people, we're not psychiatrists,
right?
But we can recognize problems and refer you to a psychiatrist. So
sure. Well,
that may be part of the solution.
This is part of even the first consultation that you guys do. Is at least they have somebody to talk to who's in the industry that's seen so many of these issues, and I think it's important for people to know they're not alone.
Well, that's true in this business. Like I said before, that everybody that comes to see us is unique. There's a lot of similar problems, but there's a combination of things that are always involved. And that's not just the finances and the circumstances, how much money they make or who they owe money to. It's their own personalities as well.
Okay.
Not everybody can deal with toughing it out and putting off some of the things in their lives, et cetera, for long-term results, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I've been at this now for a little over 40 years, and I still haven't seen everything, but I've seen a lot.
Right.
Enough to know that there's very few problems that can't be solved. You just may not like the solution. And, there's always somebody worse off than you are. So stop feeling sorry for yourself. And let's get on with the solution.
There you go. Get to the solution, and then things will change, right?
Yep.
Have you ever run into people, let's say 2 years after the fact? They come in, you help them out, you get them out of their situation. 2 years later, and I'm looking at, what has that been like? Have you ever run into people and they just say, "Oh, Leigh, that first meeting with you was fantastic. We can't believe the difference of what's happened."
It's interesting. We're in Winnipeg, and Winnipeg is a relatively small city. You run into a lot of people eventually.
Yeah.
I had an interesting situation just a couple of years ago, and I was in a retail store buying a new computer gadget. And the salesman came up to me and introduced himself because he knew me, but I didn't recognize him. So we had a really interesting conversation because he'd been one of our clients about 4 or 5 years before that. And he was saying how after he met with us, got his marital life back together again because they got rid of their financial problems. They'd gone bankrupt. They started out, they did budgeting, and they got their lives back. And he pulled out his wallet and showed me pictures of his son who 2 weeks before that had just graduated from university. And he said they kept the family together. They started the budget. They decided what was important. And that was one of the things they wanted to do, was make sure their son got his education. So, well, that made my day.
Yeah.
A lot of people, we don't hear from them afterwards. We get them back on their feet, and they don't really keep us informed of what's going on in their lives unless we run into them in some way, shape, or form. But you hear a little bit about, well, just today I talked to somebody who we organized a rebudgeting of their situation that I think can solve most of their problems. And he said, the reason I came to you is because a friend of mine came to you a few years ago and you helped him out, and he's been doing really well since then. And he said, I really go have to talk to LCTaylor to solve these problems.
Nice.
So there's some really good feedback when you get it, and it's really gratifying.
It's nice to see because it's such a positive for their whole family life. And just to hear that, forget about the money. And you mentioned that earlier on, don't just focus on the money. It's the entire family and your own health as well that can come away in a much healthier state than before with all the stress.
Well, I think that's true. If you can get rid of the stress and the worry and everything in your life, you can start focusing on the things that really matter.
Yeah.
And that's really important.
Absolutely. Well, Leigh, any final words you want to share with us today?
Not other than it's important for people to realize that there are answers and solutions to their problems. So they have to sometimes just bite the bullet and go out and find those answers and solutions. Sometimes it's coming and talking to us, and we don't charge for initial assessments. So coming in and talking to us isn't going to break the bank. It's probably going to do the opposite. And they can find some solutions. Mm-hmm. And that's the road to happiness, if not wealth.
Yeah, exactly. Leigh, well, thank you very much for this. I really appreciate you being on the show today.
Always a pleasure, Wayne.
You got it. And as Leigh mentioned, you can get that first free consultation through the website LCTaylor.com. And that is it for the show for today. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcasts from. The show is called Debt Matters Podcast. And of course, for more information, you can always check out debtmatters.ca. Thanks very much for listening.